Well, that was quick. Live on YouTube already. Let's see if it's done it on Facebook as well. Has it? Is my computer acting fast? Oh my, it has! That was quick. Let's see if, well, I guess we'll see if people start jumping on soon. Either way, for those of you here and those of you coming, thank you for joining the Midnight Society and welcome to Story Time. I see we've already got one. I'm wondering if maybe that's Amber. Who knows? She's usually like the first one here on YouTube, especially because she generally knows when I'm jumping on here. Because I'll give her a hint if it's not the regular time. She likes to ask, figure that out. So if it is you, Amber, good on ya. And I appreciate the upcoming like because I know you're going to hit like on this video. If it's not Amber, whoever you are, I may not find out who you are unless you comment, but I will thank you and say I appreciate you. So thank you, and I appreciate you. And that goes for you too, anyone who's watching on Facebook and soon Twitch. I was going to use StreamYard tonight so that I could stream live on all three platforms, but I completely forgot to do that. So Facebook and YouTube it is. At any rate, once again, welcome to the Midnight Society, another episode of Storytime, dear listeners / readers / viewers / whatever you want to be called. Don't forget to join the Facebook group Storytime, 2 words, ! At the end, so that you can have some input on what books are read. Don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe to my channel, B Picorni1, B as in Brett, P as in Picorni, OKORNY, the number 1. And also, if you would like, you can follow me on Twitch. Brett Doesn't Game, all one word, ! At the end. So, without further ado, once again, welcome. Thank you for being here. And let's get to it. I'm going to read some Russian fairy tales tonight, followed by one original piece. Again, it will be another chapter out of my story, Dark World. So, yes, that should be quite enjoyable, shouldn't it? Anyway, let us get started, shall we? Here we are with the Russian fairy tales, picking up where we left off last time. I think I dozed off a few times while I was reading, only for a few seconds last night, but I was tired. Anyway, this next story is called The Potter, not the Harry Potter, but The Potter. Although he's Russian, so I bet he is Harry. Or she. Either way. Hello, Jean. Glad you have made it. Good to see you. Thank you for jumping in, and welcome to Storytime. So here we go, The Potter. Once a potter was driving along the road with his pots and fell asleep as he went. Tsar Ivan the Terrible overtook him. There are people on the road who want to pass, the Tsar said. The potter looked behind him. Thank you humbly, he said. So you've been slumbering? I've been slumbering, great king. Fear not him who sings songs, but him who takes a nap. You're a bold one, Potter. I love such as you. Coachman, drive more slowly. And you, hello, Heather, glad you have made it, and welcome. You're a bold one, Potter. I love such as you. Coachman, drive more slowly. And you, Potter, tell me, how long have you been engaged in this trade? From my youth, and now I am middle-aged. Do you support your children? I do, your majesty, and yet I do not plow, I do not reap. Wow, must be tired. I read reap as reap. I do not mow, and the cold does not freeze me. True, Potter, and yet the world is not without evil. Yes, your majesty, there are 3 evils in the world. And what are these 3 evils, my little Potter? The first evil is a bad neighbor, the second evil is a bad wife, and the third evil is a bad mind. You know, because he's referring to him as Potter, I'm going to start reading it as if he's Severus Snape. So here we go. And now tell me, which of these evils is the worst? From a bad neighbor, I can go away, but from a bad wife, I can also go away if she agrees to stay with the children. But from one's own bad mind, one cannot go away. It is always with one. Yes, that is true, Potter. You are a smart fellow. Listen, you stick to me and I'll stick to you. Geese will come from Russia, pluck their feathers, and leave them in the proper condition. I will leave them in the proper condition, and I will pluck them clean. Well, Potter, stop for a while. I want to see your pottery. I'm enjoying this story a lot more when I read the Tsar's voice as Snape because he's calling the Potter Potter. If you agree and you think that's a more fun way of doing this, raise your hand. Well, I can't see you raise your hand, so click like and leave a comment. Oh my. Sorry. So, sorry, just wanted to make sure about something. Yes, there we are. Thanks for the thumbs up, Heather. The potter stopped and displayed his merchandise. The Tsar looked at it and chose 3 earthen dishes. Will you make some more of these? How many does your majesty want? I need about a dozen cartfuls. How much time can you give me? A month. I can deliver them in 2 weeks. I'll stick by you and you stick by me. Thanks, Potter. Hello, Mum. Glad to see you have joined us. Yes, bit of a night owl. That does happen from time to time. Thanks, Potter. And just so you know, there is a Tsar and a Potter, and the Tsar keeps calling the Potter Potter, so I'm reading his voice as Severus Snape. And you, King, where will you be when I bring the merchandise to town? I will be staying in the merchant's house. The Tsar arrived in town and gave orders that everyone use only earthenware at all receptions and that no silver, lead, copper, or wooden dishes be set on the table. The potter finished the Tsar's order and brought his merchandise to town. A certain boyar came to buy earthenware from him and said to him, God be... I'm going to read everyone who's not the Potter as Severus Snape, okay? Here we go. God be with you, Potter. I am your humble servant. Sell me all your merchandise. No, I cannot. I made it for a special order. Don't worry about that. Take this money. You cannot be held to your promise if you did not receive an advance payment for your work. Well, how much do you want? Fill each of my vessels with money. My dear little Potter, don't try to make a fool of me. This is too much. Very well, then, for each vessel filled, you will get 2. Do you agree? They agreed. You stick to me, and I'll stick to you. They began to fill the pots and empty them, to pour in and pour out. They ran out of money, and there was still a great deal of merchandise. The boyar went home to get more money. Again, they poured and poured, and there still was a great deal of merchandise left, and no money. What shall we do, my little Potter? The boyar asked. You were too greedy, and now you haven't enough money to pay. I will take your plight into consideration. Sorry. That's the potter speaking. You were too greedy, and now you haven't enough money to pay. I will take your plight into consideration, but in the meantime, do you know what I shall make you do? Pull me to that house. Then I will give you both the merchandise and all the money. The boyar hesitated for a long time. He was sorry about his money and also about his dignity, but there was nothing to be done, so he finally agreed. The horse was unharnessed. The peasant sat in the cart, and the boyar began to pull him. The potter sang a song, and the boyar dragged and dragged. Where shall I pull you? He asked. To that house over there. The potter sang merrily, and when he was close to the house, he raised his high voice. The Tsar heard him, ran out on the porch, and recognized the potter. Welcome, Potter. Thank you, your majesty. Where are you driving on? On a bad mind, your majesty. Well, you are a smart fellow, Potter. You have managed to sell your goods. Boyar, take off your boyar's garment and your boots, and you, Potter, take off your kaftan and your shoes of bast. You put them on, boyar, and you, Potter, take on this boyar's garments. He knew how to sell his goods. The potter did not work long, but he earned a great deal, and you did not know how to guard your boyar's rank. Well, Potter, did the geese come from Russia? They did. Did you pluck their feathers and leave them in the proper condition? No, your majesty, I plucked him clean, all of him. All right. Not sure what that last sentence is supposed to be, but okay. Here, by the way, is the illustration for the story. There is an illustration, yes. And there you are. So, you ready to read another story? Another Russian fairy tale? Are you? Are you? I know I am. So, shall we get to it? This one, I will not be reading any Severus Snape voice, I don't think. This one's called The Self-Pitying Goslar. In a certain kingdom, in a certain land, there lived a peasant who had a son. The peasant's name was Alexei, and the son's Vanka. When summer came, Alexei ploughed his land and planted turnips. The turnips throve so well and grew so big and succulent that it was a marvel to behold them. The peasant was glad. He went to his field every morning, rejoiced in his turnips, and gave thanks to God. One day he noticed that someone was stealing his turnips and began to watch the field. He watched and watched, but saw no one. Then he sent Vanka to the field, saying, "Go watch the turnips." Vanka came to the field and saw a boy digging up the turnips and filling 2 enormous bags with them. He slung them over his back and began to drag them along with great difficulty. His legs bent under him, his back creaked. I wonder if his name was Dwight Schrute. Little joke for any Office fans out there. The boy dragged and dragged the bags till his strength failed him. Then he threw the bags on the ground and suddenly saw Vanka standing before him. "Do me a favor, my good man," said the boy. "Help me carry these bags home. Grandfather will reward you for it." When Vanka saw the boy, he stood as if petrified, staring at him with wide eyes. Then he came to and said, "All right, I'll help you." "Vanka, you idiot!" He slung the 2 bags of turnips over his shoulders and carried them after the boy, who skipped ahead, saying, "Grandfather sends me for turnips every day. If you bring them to him, he will give you much silver and gold, but don't take it. Ask for the self-playing Goslar instead." Oh, the self-playing Goslar, not self-pitying. After a while, there's a big difference between self-playing and self-pitying. After a while, they came to the boy's house. In the corner there sat a grey-haired man with horns. Vanka bowed to him. The old man gave him a lump of gold for his trouble. Vanka's eyes began to gleam, but the boy whispered to him, "Don't take it." Vanka said, "I don't want gold. Give me the self-playing Goslar, and all the turnips will be yours." When he mentioned the self-playing Goslar, the old man's eyes popped out an inch, his mouth opened to his ears, and the horns on his forehead began to jump. Vanka was seized by fear, but the boy said, "Give it to him, grandfather. You want a great deal. But so be it. Take the Goslar, and in return, give me whatever is dearest to you in your own house." Vanka thought to himself, "Our little house barely sticks out of the ground. Surely there is nothing precious in it." But aloud he said, "I agree." And he took the self-playing Goslar and went home. When he arrived, he found his father dead on the threshold. He wept and mourned for him, buried him, and went forth to seek his fortune. You poor sap. You poor, poor sap. What is wrong with you? And I see some likes. Hello, Trisha. I'm glad you have joined us as well. He came to a large city, the capital of a great king. In front of the king's palace was a meadow in which pigs were grazing. Vanka went to the swineherd, bought some pigs from him, and began to tend them. Whenever he strummed the self-playing Goslar, his whole herd began to dance. One day, when the king was away, his daughter, that was a measly little burp. Anyway, his daughter sat by the window and saw Vanka sitting on a tree stump and strumming his Goslar while his pigs danced before him. The princess sat her maid to ask this swineherd to sell her at least one of the dancing pigs. Vanka said, "Let her come herself." The princess came and said, "Swineherd, sell me one of your pigs. My pigs are not for sale, they are sacred." "And what is their sacred price?" "Well, princess, if you wish to have one of my pigs, show me your white body up to your knees." The princess thought and thought, looked all around her to make sure that no one was looking, and raised her dress up to her knees, revealing a little birthmark on her right leg. Vanka gave her a pig. The princess ordered it to be led to her palace, called the musicians, and made the play. She wanted to see how the pig would dance to their music, but it only hid in the corners, howling and grunting. The king returned and decided to give his daughter in marriage. He summoned all the boyars and lords and merchants and peasants, kings and princes, and people of all kinds came from foreign lands and gathered in his palace. The king said, "He who guesses what mark there is on my daughter, to him I shall give her in marriage." None of them could guess, and no matter how they tried, they could not find out where the mark was. Finally, Vanka stepped forth and said that the princess had a little birthmark on her right leg. "You have guessed right," said the king. He married Vanka to his daughter and gave a great feast for all the people. Vanka was now the king's son-in-law and began to live a carefree life. It only cost him his father-in-law's, or his father's life. No big deal. Fuck that. Screw that, Vanka. Why would you? Ugh. I mean, I guess he didn't really know at first, but still, it's not a fair trade if you ask me. I wouldn't trade anyone in my family for riches and an easy life. All right, I'll read one more Russian fairy tale tonight, but before I do, I have an original story for you, and it is another chapter of that story of mine, Dark World. And each chapter is from the point of view of someone else, and they're small parts of each individual character's story. So here we go. The second chapter is called Dot. That's the name of the character. I'm going to change voices now for this reading. Alex is missing. It's only been a few hours since his call, but I know something's wrong. I'm scared. I had no reception, and if bad service is the reason I didn't have one last chance to tell my son I love him... No, don't think like that. Where do we start? Listen to the voicemail again. "Hey, Ma. Listen, I don't know time, but Nate, it's important. Have to go. Call me back." I hear voices in the background, but none stick out. I listen again. Between the breaks in signal and behind the main message is the muffled thump of nearby nightlife. A club. David Isley, his closest friend since forever, owns a club a few hours away. That must be where he's been staying lately. I love Alex, and he may legally qualify as being an adult, but he's a man-child on the run from responsibility. Sadly, sleeping in the back of his seedy friend's titty bar is probably a win in his book. Time to do something I've been avoiding. I scroll through the contact listed as dickhead in my phone and punch it with my angry thumb. Pick up, asshole. Tracy Wheeler is my half-brother in Boston. Alex was always closer to him than I ever was. Something about having a badge made him exactly the type of authority figure kids look up to. Just too bad they can't see behind the veil. The line rings on the other end without end. Voicemail. Pick up. I know it's me and it's late, but it's important, so pick up. I'll call again in a few minutes. In the meantime, I need to pack the car, 2 extra suits, some snacks, a stack of cash. A .380 on the ankle holster of my right leg is well hidden under the black slacks. 2 Remington RP9s fill the lining of my jacket. Although aiming 2 guns at once is impractical, it's damn intimidating when you're the one on the other end. I hope I don't need them, but I line my other leg with extra magazines anyway. I drive a shitty old Ford Tempo, not much power, but it gets me from point A to point B most of the time. A lovely shade of who gives a fuck gray leaves it rather inconspicuous, the likely reason I don't get as many speeding tickets as I should. I know I don't have much reason to be hasty right now. For all I know, Alex's fuck-up was eating from the strip club buffet. Regardless, I'll be chancing that speeding ticket today on the way to Boston. And that is the end of that chapter, dear readers, /listeners, /viewers. Which means, oh, hello. Oh, there you are, Peter. Hello, Amber. Glad to see you have joined us. How long have you been here? And yes, yay, indeed, Gene. So, dear you guys, Shall we? One more Russian fairy tale before we call it a night. I think that sounds like a lovely plan. This is a long one, so bear with me. There are, however, some illustrations, or at least there's one illustration. Good gravy, this is a long story. But let's hope it's a good one. It's got a cool name, doesn't it? Marco the Rich and Vasily the Luckless. What a name. No, not Vaseline, Vasily. In a certain kingdom, in a certain land, there once lived a very wealthy merchant. Haven't heard this beginning before. He had an only daughter, Anastasia. Oh, Anastasia the Fair, who was only 5 years of age. Ooh, I hope we don't see something unsavory coming up. The merchant's name was Marco, and his surname was the Rich. He could not endure beggars. Whenever they came begging at his window, he ordered his servants to drive them away and loose the dogs upon them. What a bastard. One day, 2 old grey-haired men came begging to his window. Marco saw them and ordered the dogs to be let loose upon them. Anastasia the Fair heard of it and began to implore her father, "My dear father, for my sake at least let them take shelter in the castle shed." The father consented and ordered the beggars to be led to the cattle shed. When everyone in the house was asleep, Anastasia rose up and went to the cattle shed. She climbed up to the loft and watched the beggars. When it became time for matins, the candle beneath the icon lighted by itself, the old men rose up, took priestly vestments out of their bags, put them on, and began the service of matins. An angel of God came flying and said, "In such and such a village, a son is born to such and such a peasant. By what name shall he be called, and what shall be his fortune?" One of the old men said, "I give him the name of Vasily and the surname of the Luckless, and I hereby present him with all the wealth of Marco the Rich, under whose roof we are now spending the night." Anastasia heard all of this. At daybreak, the old men made ready to go and left the castle shed. Thank you for hitting like, Amber. I appreciate you. Anastasia went to her father and told him everything that she had seen and heard there. I bet she did, and good for her for doing so. Oh, I'm glad you like the side comments, Jean. Thank you for the compliment. Right now I have hiccups for some reason. Sorry, just... There we go. Type a reply to someone. There we go. All right. The father wondered whether the prophecy would come true and decided to see whether a babe had really been born in the village. He had his carriage harnessed, went straight to the priest of the village and asked him, "Was a babe born in your village on such and such a day?" "Yes," said the priest. "A babe was born to our poorest peasant. I christened him Vasily and surnamed him the Luckless, but I have not yet baptized him because no one wants to stand as godfather to the poor man's child." Marco offered to stand as godfather, asked the priest's wife to be godmother, and bade them prepare a rich repast. The little boy was brought to the church and baptized, and everyone feasted to his heart's content. The next day, Marco the Rich summoned the poor peasant to him, spoke kindly to him, and said, "Friend, you are a poor man. You won't be able to bring up your son. Give him to me. I will help him to rise in the world, and I will give you 1,000 rubles for your own maintenance." The poor man thought and finally consented. Marco gave him the promised money, took the child, wrapped him in fox furs, put him in his carriage, and drove away. It was winter. Having driven several versts, Marco bade his coachman stop, handed him the godchild, and said, "Take him by the legs and hurl him into the ravine. You piece of shit!" The coachman did as he was ordered and hurled the child into a deep ravine, and Marco said, "Now, Vasily, take possession of my wealth." What a fucking bastard. I hope he does lose all his wealth and much more. 2 days later, some merchants chanced to travel by the same road. They were carrying 12,000 rubles that they owed to Marco the Rich. When they came near the ravine, they heard the wailing of a child. They stopped, listened, and sent a servant to see who it could be. The servant went down into the ravine and beheld a green meadow. In the meadow a child sat, playing with flowers and whimpering. The servant told all this to his master, who went to the ravine himself, took the child, wrapped him in a fur coat, returned to his carriage, and drove on. The merchants came to Marco the Rich, who asked them where they had found the child. They told him, and he guessed at once that it was Vasily the Luckless, his own godchild. He took the boy in his arms, held him for a while, and gave him to his daughter, saying, "Take him, my daughter, and nurse him." Then he plied the merchants with all kinds of drink and asked them to let him keep the child. The merchants at first refused, but when Marco told them that he would cancel their debt, they consented and left. Anastasia was so overjoyed that she immediately found a cradle, hung curtains around it, and began to tend the boy, not leaving him by night or by day. One day went by, then another. On the third day, Marco came home late when Anastasia was asleep, took the child, put him into a little barrel, tarred it, and threw it into the water of the port. What is wrong with this guy? The barrel sailed and sailed, till finally it floated up to a monastery. A monk happened to be fetching water. He heard the wailing of a child. He looked about him and saw the barrel. He immediately took a boat, caught up the barrel, broke it open, and found the child. He brought the babe to his abbot. The abbot named the child Vasily and surnamed him the Luckless. Vasily the Luckless lived in the monastery for 16 years and learned how to read and write. The abbot loved him and made him his sacristan. It came to pass that Marco the Rich was traveling to a foreign kingdom to collect debts owed to him, and on his way stopped at the monastery. He was received as befits a rich man. The abbot ordered the sacristan to go to the church. He went, lighted the candles, and read and sang. Marco the Rich asked the abbot, "Has this young man been with you long?" The abbot told him how the boy had been found in a barrel, and when. Marco reckoned the time and realized the sacristan was his godchild. He said to the abbot, "If I had an intelligent young man like your sacristan, I would appoint him chief clerk and put him in charge of all my treasure. Could you not give him to me?" For a long time the abbot made excuses. Finally, Marco offered him 25,000 rubles for his monastery. This Marco dude is a fucking idiot. The abbot consulted the brothers, and after long deliberation they consented to part with Vasily the Luckless. This is a long story, but it's actually a pretty good one compared to a lot of the others. Marco sent Vasily home and gave him a letter to his wife, which ran as follows. "Wife, when you receive this letter, take its bearer immediately to our soap works, and when you pass near the great boiling cauldron, push him in. Do not fail to do this. If you fail, I shall punish you severely, for this youth has evil designs on me." Vasily took the letter and went on his way. He met an old man and said, "Whither are you going, Vasily the Luckless?" Vasily said, "To the house of Marco the Rich, with a letter to his wife." "Show me this letter." Vasily took it out and gave it to the old man, who broke the seal and asked Vasily to read it. Vasily read it and burst into tears. "What have I done to this man," he said, "that he should send me to my death?" The old man said, "Do not grieve. God will not forsake you." Then he breathed on the letter, and the seal resumed its former shape. "Go now," said the old man, "and give the letter to the wife of Marco the Rich." Vasily came to the house of Marco the Rich and gave the letter to his wife. She read it, pondered deeply, then called her daughter Anastasia and read Marco's letter to her. This is what the letter now said. "Wife, one day after you receive this letter, marry Anastasia to the bearer. Do this without fail. Otherwise you shall answer to me. In rich people's houses, beer does not have to be brewed nor wine distilled. Everything is ready for a gay feast and a wedding." Vasily was dressed in rich garments, shown to Anastasia, and she found him to her liking. So they were wedded. One day the wife of Marco the Rich was told that her husband had arrived in port, and accompanied by her son-in-law and daughter, she went to meet him. Marco looked at his son-in-law, fell into a rage, and said to the wife, How dared you to wed our daughter to him? By your command, answered his wife. Marco asked to see his letter, read it, and found that it was written in his hand. Marco lived with his son-in-law for 1 month, a second, and a third. One day he summoned the young man before him and said to him, Take this letter beyond thrice 9 lands, to the thrice 10th kingdom, to my friend King Dragon. Collect from him the rent for 12 years for a palace he built on my land, and find out what has happened to 12 of my ships that have not been seen for 3 years. Set out on your way tomorrow morning. Vasily took the letter, went to his wife, and told her what Marco had commanded him to do. Anastasia wept bitterly, but dared not ask her father to change his mind. Early next morning, Vasily prayed to God, took some biscuits in his knapsack, and set out. He walked on the road for a long time or a short time, a long way or a short. In any case, at one point he heard a voice at the side of the road saying, Vasily the luckless, whither are you going? He looked around him on all sides and said, Who is calling me? I, the oak, am asking you whither you are going. I am going to King Dragon to collect rent for 12 years. The oak said, If you arrive in time, remember to ask how much longer the oak must stand after standing for 300 years. Vasily listened carefully and continued on his journey. He came to a river and sat in the ferry boat. The old ferryman asked him, Whither are you going, my friend? Vasily told him what he had told the oak, and the ferryman requested him to ask the king how much longer he would have to ferry, for he had now been ferrying 30 years. I shall ask him, said Vasily. He went on, reached the sea. A whale lay stretched out across the sea, and people were walking and driving over here. When Vasily stepped on the whale, she said, Vasily the luckless, whither are you going? Vasily told her what he had told the ferryman, and the whale said, If you arrive in time, remember to ask how much longer I must lie here stretched across the sea, for people on foot and people on horseback have worn down my body to my very ribs. What a poor whale. Vasily promised to ask, and went on. He came to a green meadow. In the meadow stood a huge palace. Vasily entered the palace and went from room to room. Each was more splendid than the last. He went into the farthest room and found a lovely maiden sitting on the bed and weeping bitterly. When she saw Vasily, she rose up, approached him, and said, Who are you, and how did you happen to come to this accursed place? Vasily showed her the letter and told her that Marco, the rich, had ordered him to collect rent for 12 years from King Dragon. The maiden threw the letter into the stove and said to Vasily, You have been sent here not to collect rent, but as food for the dragon. But tell me, what roads did you take? Did you see or hear anything on your way here? Vasily told her about the oak, the ferryman, and the whale. They had no sooner finished talking than the earth and the palace began to tremble. The maiden put Vasily into a chest under the bed and said to him, Now listen to my conversation with the dragon. And saying this, she went out to meet him. When King Dragon entered the room, he said, Why is there a Russian smell here? The maiden said, How could a Russian smell get here? You have been flying over Russia, and the Russian smell is in your nostrils. The dragon said, I am terribly exhausted. Pick the lice in my head. And he lay down on the bed. The maiden said to him, King, what a dream I had while you were away. I was going along a road, and an oak cried to me, Ask the king how long I must stand here. It will stand, said the king, until someone comes to it and kicks it with his foot. Then it will be uprooted and will fall, and beneath it there is an enormous amount of gold and silver. Marco the rich does not have as much. The maiden went on, and then I dreamed that I came to a river, and the ferryman asked me how long he would have to ferry. Let him put on the ferry boat the first man who comes to him, and push the boat away from the shore, and this man will ferry forever, and the ferryman will go home. And then I dreamed that I walked across the sea on a whale, and she asked me how long she would have to lie there. She shall lie there till she vomits up the 12 ships of Marco the rich. Then she will go down into the water and let her body grow again. When King Dragon had said this, he fell sound asleep. The maiden let Vasily out of the chest and advised him thus, Do not tell the whale that she must vomit up the 12 ships of Marco the rich until you have crossed to the other side. Likewise, when you come to the ferryman, do not tell him what you have heard until you have crossed. And when you come to the oak, kick it toward the east, and you will discover countless riches. Vasily the Luckless thanked the maiden and went away. Before we continue the story, first, check out this illustration. Masterful, quite something else. And that it is. Now, back to the story. He came to the whale, and she asked, "Did he say anything about me?" "He did. As soon as I cross, I shall tell you." When Vasily had crossed over, he said, "Vomit up the 12 ships of Marco the Rich." The whale vomited up the ships, and they sailed forth, wholly unscathed, and Vasily the Luckless found himself in water up to his knees. Then he came to the ferryman, who asked, "Did you speak about me to King Dragon?" "I did," said Vasily, "but first ferry me over." When he had crossed over, he said to the ferryman, "Whoever comes to you first, put him on the ferry boat and push it away from the shore. He will ferry forever, and you will go home." Vasily the Luckless came to the oak, kicked it with his foot, and the oak fell. Beyond it he found gold and silver and precious stones without number. Vasily looked back, and lo and behold, the 12 ships that had been thrown up by the whale were sailing straight to shore, and the ships were commanded by the same old man whom Vasily had met when he was carrying the letter of Marco the Rich to his wife. The old man said to Vasily, "This, Vasily, is what the Lord has blessed you with." Then he got off his ship and went on his way. The sailors transported the gold and silver to the ships, and then set out with Vasily the Luckless. Marco the Rich was told that his son-in-law was coming with 12 ships, and that King Dragon had rewarded him with countless riches. Marco grew furious that what he desired had not come to pass. He had his carriage harnessed, and he set out to drive to King Dragon's palace and upbraid him. He came to the ferryman and sat in the ferryboat. The ferryman pushed it away from the shore, and Marco remained to ferry forever. But Vasily the Luckless came home to his wife and mother-in-law, began to live with them and gain wealth, helped the poor, gave food and drink to beggars, and took possession of all the wealth of Marco the Rich. Well, that was not a bad story, actually. What morals do you think there were? I think the morals were basically keep the faith, believe in God and all that jazz, and good things happen to those who wait and who can follow directions. And, the old bastard, the greedy rich bastard, in the end, well, he got fucked like he deserved. Don't try to kill babies. All sorts of stuff like that. All sorts of good morals in that story. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. I believe it's time to end story time for the evening. I hope you had a good night as I did, and that you enjoyed them. And until next time, that being tomorrow night when we will resume Dracula. So, don't forget, join Storybook on Facebook, Storytime on Facebook. Like this video on YouTube and hit subscribe to my channel, BeeperCorny1. And follow me on Twitch as well, Brett Doesn't Game, all one word. So, until next time, like I said, that's tomorrow, I bid you all adieu. So please have a good night and take care. Much love, smoochy smoochy.